Look at the modern world. We possess vast technological capabilities and global wealth, yet we are surrounded by increasing polarization, social fragmentation, and a steady collapse in public trust. The standard operating assumption of modern political science is that material variables, like a rising GDP, advanced infrastructure, and complex legal institutions, are the primary guarantors of a stable society. But human history suggests a recurring risk. When material and technological progress outpaces the development of a synchronized moral infrastructure, the system begins to crack under the pressure of its own complexity. This vulnerability is the focus of scholar Manfred Ayuk. In his framework, known as Afrisophy, or the African science of wisdom, ethics is not treated as a branch of philosophy. It is categorized as the first science of civilization. Ayuk argues that before any society can sustain a constitution, a court system, or a functional economy, it must first construct an ethical architecture. Moral principles are the invisible foundation upon which all other institutions are built. A purely technocratic model is brittle, imposed from the top down. The African science of wisdom proposes the exact opposite, an organic, interconnected network that builds itself from the ground up, starting with the individual and expanding outward. To understand how this works, we need to construct this Afrisophical model layer by layer, beginning at the bedrock of human character and scaling up to the governance of a globalized world. Exploring this structure requires a precise vocabulary. We have to move past vague, simplified translations of African concepts and use specific terms designed to describe the mechanics of the system. The objective of this architecture is not mere economic efficiency. The system is optimized for human flourishing and the preservation of human dignity. Civilization is a moral project. Without a coherent ethical architecture, even the most technologically sophisticated nations are simply well-equipped ruins waiting to happen. The first layer of this architecture is morality. In Afrisophy, this is not a static list of religious customs or legal rules enforced by the state. It is defined by the term moral being, the lifelong, disciplined pursuit of right living that actively preserves the inherent dignity of other people. This brings us to Ubuntu. Western interpretations often reduce this philosophy to simple interpersonal kindness or generosity. That misses the structural reality of the concept. Ubuntu is a precise mechanism of what Ayuk calls shared humanity. It dictates that human identity does not exist in isolation. When we expand our view, we see that every individual is tethered to a wider network. Because of this interconnected design, harming a single person isn't an isolated event. It degrades the structural integrity of the entire surrounding network, diminishing the light and energy available to adjacent connections. Conversely, when one person uplifts another through justice or compassion, both individuals are strengthened. The node is reignited, and the tethers between them thicken, increasing the resilience of the whole system. Participating in this network requires Ubuntu being. This is the continuous process of realizing your highest human identity through relationships built on mutual dignity and reciprocity. Scaled up, this principle becomes human unity. It rejects arbitrary divisions based on race, nationality, or status, recognizing instead a single, indivisible moral community. This structure does not erase the individual in favor of a faceless collective. Rather, the individual achieves their highest degree of freedom and security precisely by strengthening the connections around them. The bedrock of a civilization is established only when individuals recognize that their own survival and flourishing depend entirely on the health of the network as a whole. A network relying on shared humanity remains vulnerable if those connections depend on sporadic acts of goodwill or constant external policing. That requires the second layer, virtue. In this system, virtue is the mechanism that transforms isolated good decisions into permanent infrastructure. This is achieved through character craft, the deliberate daily construction of character through repeated habits of wisdom, courage, and responsibility. Over time, these fluid actions solidify into load-bearing structures. The result is integrity living. This occurs when a person's internal convictions exactly match their external decisions, creating absolute predictability and stability within the network. This directly challenges how modern societies evaluate talent. Through the concept of excellence craft, Afrisophy rejects the idea that you can separate technical competence from moral character. Under this framework, a brilliant engineer who compromises public safety or a highly effective politician who lacks integrity cannot be categorized as excellent. In fact, high intelligence operating without virtue being is categorized as an active structural threat to the system, because greater capacity without moral restraint only amplifies the potential for damage. Legal courts, financial markets, and governments do not sustain themselves. They are entirely dependent on the habitual moral excellence of the people operating them. Yet, even highly virtuous systems experience friction, wrongdoing, and failure. To survive, the architecture requires a third layer, justice. Afrisophy defines this as justicecraft. It is the active protection of human dignity and the deliberate restoration of moral harmony, rather than the mere enforcement of written laws. A strictly punitive legal model treats an offense by isolating or removing the offending component. When a node turns severe red and fractures its connections, the entire surrounding structure immediately destabilizes. Simply deleting that node permanently weakens the overall grid. The system instead utilizes restorative justice. The surrounding nodes extend new, specialized pathways to demand accountability, neutralize the damage, and repair the fractured tethers. This repair process cannot begin with truth justice. Restoration requires the absolute acknowledgement of reality and responsibility before any healing can take place. Administering this requires equity wisdom. It is the sophisticated capacity to apply universal moral rules while accounting for the highly specific contextual realities of the individuals involved in the fracture. Justice, therefore, operates as an ongoing communal responsibility. It protects both the objective truth of the offense and the future possibility of the offender. Justice acts as the civilization's immune system. A society that punishes without restoring creates a fractured, tyrannical network, while a society practicing justicecraft secures its own future. When moral being, charactercraft, and justicecraft operate in sequence, they produce the ultimate output of the system, trust. In the Afrisophical context, trust is not an emotion or blind optimism. It is the predictable result of observing consistent competence and integrity over time. It functions as the invisible infrastructure that binds the entire civilizational architecture together, allowing the system to glow uniformly and energy to flow without friction. This creates a trust culture, a societal baseline where reliability is the ordinary expectation. This clarity streamlines the mechanics of daily life and economics. The practical economics of a trust culture are massive. When trust is high, the frictional costs of a civilization, lengthy legal contracts, heavy security monitoring, and gridlocked political polarization approach zero. But when trust collapses, every single transaction becomes exponentially more expensive and slow, from interpersonal communication all the way up to international trade. Trust is a civilization's greatest form of wealth. A society can weather the loss of its financial capital or infrastructure, but it cannot survive the depletion of its relational trust. This theoretical model directly confronts the immediate challenges of the 21st century: rapid globalization, climate change, and the deployment of artificial intelligence. As humanity's technological power scales, the blast radius of any moral failure scales right alongside it. A single unethical decision now has global consequences. Navigating this requires public wisdom. This is the requirement that new knowledge and technology be governed by an ethical architecture, rather than driven exclusively by profit or efficiency. We see this urgency with artificial intelligence. Algorithms are incredibly effective at optimizing efficiency and calculating probabilities, but they are entirely incapable of executing justicecraft or experiencing human dignity. The application of this power must be guided by moral stewardship, the intergenerational responsibility to manage our technological and environmental inheritance for those not yet born, thinking far beyond short-term political cycles. This is the complete sequence of Afrisophy. Morality establishes the principles. Ubuntu maps the relationships. Virtue forms the character. Justice protects the system. And trust binds it all into a flourishing civilization. The ultimate survival of human civilization will not depend on the sophistication of the machines we are capable of building. It will depend entirely on the moral character of the human beings who govern them.